So I'm going to start again. Sorry. Three, two, one. We welcome back Barbara O'Neill, CFP, AFC, owner, CEO of Money Talk Financial Planning Seminars and Publications, where she writes, speaks, and reviews content about personal finance. She's also a distinguished professor emeritus at Rutgers University. But most importantly to Scott and I, she's a monthly columnist for 403bwise.org. Welcome back, Barbara.
Glad to be here. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you guys.
We love our conversations and we love your upcoming article, Transitioning from 403b Saver to Post Career Spender. Wait, I have to eventually take money out of my 403b. What is going on with this article, Barbara?
Well, I mean, it's the flip side of what we see in most of the articles and in most of the posts on the 403BY's Facebook page. Many people are just so concerned about the accumulation phase, save, save, save for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it is for your career. And then there comes a time when you almost have to flip that switch and go from being a saver to a spender. And so I thought we didn't really have a lot of content on that. I mean, I've kind of gone around the edges on it, and we've had posts about RMDs, for example, and tax issues and things like that. But I thought we really needed an article that talked about what do you do with the money when you're older and you have to start taking money out. Even if you don't want to take money out, the RMD rules, of course, will require you to take money out of your 403B plan. So that was kind of the impetus for the article, is just talking about all the ways that people can think about spending down their assets. And if they don't spend them down, they'll pass them on to heirs, whether it's individuals or charities that will eventually receive that money. The first chapter in my book, Flipping a Switch, is if you don't spend your money, someone will. So kind of tying into that theme that the money will go somewhere. And it's always best to have a plan for how you want to spend down your assets than just to have it happen haphazardly.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I'm someone who is now part of the age 60 club. Scott, you'll get there in 10 years. Take your time would be my recommendation to you. So, of course, I found this particularly interesting, and I agree with you. We need more content on this. I feel like the site has sort of mirrored my age, Scott, especially at the beginning when I started at age 33 or 34. It was all about the accumulation phase. But now I'm beginning to see the other side. Scott, do you want to add anything before we have Barbara go through the saving withdrawal strategies?
Yeah, I think, well, actually, so Barbara, you wrote in this post, you wrote, many 403b participants have followed advice to save, save, save for decades. So this is Dan and me as well, and are hesitant to spend their savings when they retire. Psychologically, seeing less money than they had before feels like a stock market loss. So my
Hmm.
question to you as we kick this off is, how have you dealt with this issue in your own life?
Okay, fair question, I suppose. I guess the short answer is I really haven't. I have a very generous pension that I worked 41 years, 4 months, and it's in the civil service retirement system because cooperative extension was aligned with the federal agency as well as state and local agencies. So I personally have not pulled any money out of my accounts to date. However, shortly I will have to make my first RMD withdrawal, and I've got a plan for it. I put a worksheet in the blog post about some planning that people can do. So I've been doing that planning. Pretty much everything else is untouched.
That's a luxury, isn't it, Barbara, to be in that
It is.
situation?
It is. And when I wrote the book, I also mentioned that it was written from a place of privilege because There are just so many baby boomers that are struggling. I mean, baby
Yeah.
boomers are one of the, I think they're the fastest growing segment of the homeless population.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, there's a many people that unfortunately were not able to save and are really living on the very edge of finances.
Yeah, that's tough. They're a generation that was almost sort of in between the pension era and then the 401k explosion, and I wonder if that played any role in that.
Yeah,
Mm,
they didn't have the pensions to rely on that.
mm. I was very fortunate to have one, but many people don't. So that's the short answer. I haven't really touched anything. Haven't had to.
Okay.
Haven't had to.
That's no, that is a good position to find yourself in. Well, again, I think it speaks to your acumen in personal finance, your planning. You are someone who speaks of what you know and what you employ.
I
So,
walk
okay,
my talk.
that's right. It's right. Your organization is called Money Talk. So you walk the money talk, Barbara.
Hmm.
Okay, let's go through the saving withdrawal strategies. And you touched on that word, RMD. What are those and what does that mean?
Okay, so required minimum distributions are the mandatory withdrawals that people have to take out at a certain age. So, thinking about the older adult population now that are kind of hitting those benchmarks, anybody that was born between 1951 and 1959 has an RMD age of 73, and anybody born 1960 and later has an RMD age of 75, which will, they'll hit in the next decade or so. So it's a mandatory withdrawal. The IRS has a table. It's based on life expectancy at different ages. The table was last revised 3 years ago in 2022. They actually have the ending date in that chart of 120 plus. So they're planning for a long life expectancy should they happen. The previous chart only went up to 115. Uh, so what people do is they calculate the RMD. There's two variables that are involved. The one is their balance on December 31st of every year in their tax deferred plan. So if it's a tax deferred traditional IRA or the 403B plan, something like that. So they need to know that balance with the, I mean, I looked up my RMD amount on January 1st of this year. I mean, all you got to do is go into your accounts, log in, see the balance on December 31st, and you know what you're in for by, sometime throughout the next year. So you need to know that balance, and then there's age-based divisors. The IRS has something called the Uniform Lifetime Table that has divisors for various ages. So again, it's just a matter of doing some math, just dividing the divisor into the year-end account balance. So your RMD is always going to be a moving target because you never know how the stock market is going to perform or investments in general, depending on how people are invested. And then obviously your age is going to change every year. So the divisors will go down when your age goes up. So by the time you get to age 120 plus, should you get there, the divisor is 2. So that means that,
Wow.
50% of whatever you have left at age 120 plus will be subject to the RMDs. So it's, something that people need to plan for. And in the blog post, I put in a worksheet that people can make a plan for. And I developed this for my students. I teach a lot of classes here for older adults in Florida where I live. And it's basically, you have three choices basically. You can either spend the money, you can gift the money, or you resave the money. Of course, you have to take the taxes off on top. And generally, the vendor has an online platform. I personally have two assets that are subject to RMDs. I have my 403B plan, and then I have a SEP IRA that I had through self-employment. So I have those two plans, and one's with Vanguard, one's with TIAA, and they both have platforms where you can go online and pick a date that you want to make your withdrawal, a frequency, so some people might do monthly, some people might do quarterly or annually, depending on, their situation. And you can pick from what investment in your overall plan does that money come out of. So you basically make all those selections, and the providers will help people too, the vendors, if they have any questions about that for sure. And then, so you pay the taxes, and then you just make a decision. How much are you going to give to others? How much are you going to spend? Now, for some people, the spending is going to be essential spending, paying their monthly bills. For other people, it's going to be discretionary spending, going on trips or um, any other hobbies or, whatever they want to do with that money. It's their money. They've been saving it for decades. They can do whatever they want with it. And then the resaving, so that's where you get the frugal ants that I referred to in the article, the people that are very frugal and put everything away. Those frugal ants can actually go turn around if they choose to do so and resave that money. Options typically include a taxable account, brokerage accounts. It could be mutual funds, stocks, ETFs, whatever. Or if they qualify by having an earned income and also not having too much income, they could also do a Roth IRA and get some tax-free uh, diversification in their portfolio. Because unfortunately, people in the baby boom generation, they were well into their careers before Roth IRAs came on the scene. So they haven't had as many years to accumulate in Roth accounts as younger generations would have had, because again, they weren't available through the early years of our working lives. So those are your choices. You spend it, you gift it, and you resave it if you want to, or a combination. I personally will be doing a combination of the three. And again, the tax situation, I personally will be over withholding because I'm also um, using that withholding to cover an I bond drawdown strategy that I have.
Ah.
So, yeah, I have 12 I bonds. And so I have a 12-year strategy. I will take a bond a year for 12 years so that all of them will be withdrawn by the time the last one matures. Because that's a common error sometimes people make. They hold on those bonds forever and they don't pay after 30 years.
Yeah.
But again, you don't want to take out a whole bunch of bonds at one time and jinx your tax situation. So again, just kind of a gradual strategy doing that. So I'm over withholding on the RMD as a way to cover the tax liability for that and also Social Security Fairness Act implications and things like that. So, yeah, so that's the RMD. So that's what I called in my book, Flipping a Switch, the mandatory switch. Because everything else is voluntary that people can do as far as transitions that they make. But this is the one that you have to do.
That's very good. I like this. I do want to point out, you point out in the last sentence of this part that Roth IRAs, Roth 403Bs, Roth 457s, and 401Ks are not subject to required minimum distributions.
Hmm.
So this money only applies, or this strategy only applies to your pre-tax
Sure.
assets. And while you can gift, after you pay your taxes, you can gift this money to, kids or relatives or whomever you want. There is another strategy if you plan on gifting to nonprofits that you might consider once you turn 70 and a half, even before required distributions, called qualified charitable
Mm.
distributions,
QCDs, yeah. Hmm.
QCDs. You can do them from IRAs, not right now from 401ks, 403bs, and 457s. But that is, do you want to talk about that real quick, a QCD?
Sure. Yeah, personally, I've done a couple of them.
Oh,
So, yeah, so the QCDs you could either do during that short gap year period because they take effect at age 70 and a half. And if your RMDs start at 73, you got like 2.5 years. And the 75 people will have, a little bit longer. And so basically, this year it's up to $108,000. It's a pretty generous limit
wow.
that you can have the money sent directly from the custodian to the qualified charity. So it doesn't get sent to you. It has to go direct transfer. And yeah, so what it did for me is it pretty much took away one account that I would otherwise have subject to RMDs because I told you I had two accounts. I would have had three. So that plus Roth conversions, I did a combination of QCDs and Roth conversions to eliminate one tax deferred account before I turned RMD age. So yeah, that's something that people can do, and it was very seamless the times that I did it. It was just, you just contact the custodian. They take care of all the vetting of the charities and the sending of the checks and everything. It worked out very well.
Scott, was that a pitch for people to donate to 403(b)(wise? Because we are a nonprofit. Uh,
I mean, no, but
But it could be.
Barb, two questions before we continue. The
Yeah.
first one, you mentioned the tax portion of this when you begin these withdrawals. Do the financial firms withhold those taxes, or is that something that happens when you file your own taxes?
No, you do the withholding. That's what I was saying before, that you go onto their platforms and it gives you
How
an
much they
opportunity.
keep?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think for many of them, the default is about 20%,
Okay.
but it could be less, it could be more. You just, fill in the field on their registration form or enroll, whatever you call it, whether you're telling them what you want to do, and they will withhold that percentage.
And that's a good strategy if they don't have a default, then is that number 20%, you would say.
Well, again, it depends on the person's situation. For me, I went a little higher because I'm withholding not just for
Mhm.
the 403B plan, but because of the I bonds that I mentioned. So every situation is different.
Yeah, I've started to get a small pension from Cal Stirs from my teaching time,
Hmm.
and they have that, the withdrawal option um, online. And again, I was a little more aggressive in how much I withheld because I don't like owing taxes. I know that's a whole other debate on how to handle that. Second question, this could be for Scott. Scott, when it comes time to begin withdrawals, this is probably a reason to try to consolidate, would you say, your accounts into one or two financial firms to make this process easier?
potentially, if you've got a really good 403b, there's something that you can't get outside of that 403b. So maybe like it's got a high interest rate that is no longer available on the outside. Maybe you want to hold on to that. But consolidating to an IRA does you a couple different things. One, it gives you a greater base for which to make qualified charitable distributions if you wanted to, because you can't make those from a 403b or a 457. And also, it's just it's just easier, and
Easier.
fewer
Yeah.
accounts to log into. But having said that, you can take one required distribution from a single account, and as long as you've done the calculation for all your similar account types, that distribution will be enough to account for all of them. So, for example, if you have
Hmm.
three different IRAs. I don't know. Maybe you've got one at Vanguard, one at Schwab, one at Lincoln. You can add those three together, the balance on December 31st of the prior year, and you can just take it from one of them, and it'll satisfy it for all. Same thing for 403B, same thing for 457. But if, and this is where your question really comes to fruition, is that if you've got an IRA and you've got a 403B and you've got 457s, and maybe you have multiples of them, like you do have to take a distribution from each account type.
Oh,
So if you
okay.
are able to roll them all over to one IRA or even just one 403b, then you only have to take a single distribution for all those accounts. And it does make it a little bit easier come RMD time. But what I typically do is I get things set up um, to be automatic with the company. So the company automatically calculates it every single year, sends it out minus the taxes. And so it's just automated and they don't, the customer doesn't have to do anything after that. So
I
at
did
one
not
time.
know that they would do that. That's a fabulous, fabulous resource then. So a Vanguard will do that for you, send it out periodically, could be monthly, could be one time a year, etc.
Yeah, they will only do it on the funds that are with them. So
Mm.
again, another reason to potentially consolidate is um, you can have all your funds in one place, one RMD, and you never really have to worry about it. Once it's been set up, every year they recalculate the amount and send you the new amount.
And Scott, this and Barbara, this is stuff people can do themselves. You don't need a financial advisor to do this. Particularly teachers who we think are amazing are very capable of setting this up.
Yes, of course, that you could do that very easily. And again, there is online support through the vendors too, should you need it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Barbara, back to you.
Okay, so we got rid of the mandatory flip switch here, the RMDs, but then people may have other money in other places. So people may have Roth accounts, people may have taxable accounts. So what are some of the withdrawal strategies that come into play for those people? So first one is one that's been around now for decades, is the so-called 4% rule that was derived from research that was done in 1994 by a financial planner slash researcher, Bill Bengen. And what he did is he looked at a portfolio that had 50% stock and 50% bonds and looked at the probability of how long that money would last. So they call that kind of the success rate of how long money will last without running out. And what he found is that if people want to have their money last for 30 years, he used 30 years figuring that people would be like 65 and live to 95, that with that 50-50 stock bond portfolio, if you withdrew 4% of the account balance in year one and then inflation adjusted it thereafter, it would have a high probability of success of not running out of money. So, for example, let's say somebody has $500,000 and you multiply that by, 4%, that's going to be $20,000. And so that would be year one would be $20,000. And then if you assume 3% for inflation, 3% times 20,000 would be $600. So in year two, you'd be 20,000 plus $600. So you would be kind of building up on the amount you withdraw to compensate for inflation. So there's been a lot of studies that have been done since that. And most recently, Bill Bengen, the original author of the 1994 study, actually did a new study with, I believe he used additional asset classes and of course more recent history in the stock market because again 1994 was a long time away and he actually found in his most recent study that 4.7% is what he terms the safe withdrawal rate. And safe withdrawal rate simply means the withdrawal rate to take to not outlive your money. So this is always being researched. I know every year Morningstar does their own calculations of what their recommended withdrawal rate is. And a lot of what they're doing, of course, is in real time, looking at the current rates of return in stocks and bonds and other asset categories. So many people will just assume that 4% rule. That becomes a guideline for some people for anything that doesn't have an RMD determining what they have to withdraw. Many people like that. It's pretty simple math, and it's been around for a lot of years. I know, Scott, would you add anything else?
I don't know. I always feel like I'm more conservative than everybody else. I feel like things can happen in the market. I think we expect the markets to behave in the future like they have in the past, and we sort of exclude the possibility of another Great Depression. So I tend to err on the more cautious side, and
Hmm.
when it gets to that 5% mark, I don't know. I feel like that might be aggressive, but that's just me. Also, I tend to do planning as an asset liability match as opposed to a withdrawal rate. So
Right.
that's it's a little more work, but you get an idea of whether or not you actually have enough capital for it. But I mean, Bill Bingen is a legend. I'm
Hmm.
not gonna, I'm not gonna be the guy who's like, oh yeah, Bill Bingen doesn't know what he's talking about. He's done a great job, and here he's like 77 years old. And he's got a new book out, going over withdrawal rates. It's really neat. So
Hmm.
I,
Well,
I think this is a good tool to have in your arsenal.
I can confirm Scott's conservatism on this topic. So I have a spreadsheet with my retirement accounts, and I have it set a withdrawal rate of 3.5% because of Scott. And so last week,
Hmm.
after I'd read that article, Barbara, about, Nick Majuli, his headline was even more sort of eye-catching. Is 5% the new 4%? I think is something to that effect. And so I plugged in 4.7%. And Scott, I like those numbers a lot better. But I did go back to the 3.5.
Right. And of course, the thing to keep in mind with that 4% rule is the assumptions that underlie it. So if people are very conservative and don't have 50% of their assets in stock, they probably should be, below 4%, maybe
Yeah.
3% or 3.5% or whatever. And then on the other flip side is if people aren't retiring until they're 80 years old, they may not have that 30-year life expectancy, even though the
True.
IRS thinks they will for RMDs.
Yeah.
So they might go above, 5, 6%. So again, it's something that has to be analyzed on an individual basis, with a calculator. Yeah. So that's the 4% rule. Another method that is out there that some people use is just figuring out their life expectancy and taking whatever assets they have and dividing, if it's going to last 20 years, you divide 20 into the amount that you have. And for example, if somebody thought they had a 20-year life expectancy and had $500,000, they might withdraw 25,000 a year. Of course, there's no guarantees on this. Nobody knows what their life expectancy is going to be. I would caution if anybody's going to do that to try to use the calculators that are more personalized, based on your health habits and your family health history and your current health status. It'll ask you about whether you ever had cancer or something like that, because you'll get a much more precise estimate. But again, the key word is estimate. Nobody
Yeah.
knows for sure.
Well, we're going to post a link to a life expectancy calculator. I should have had us all take this before we jumped on here, but I took it myself. This one's a Canadian one,
Hmm.
but it does a pretty good job. It did make me a little upset when I put in my height and weight, and my life expectancy dropped by 2 years. That really annoyed me. But as of right now, it says I'm going to live to 89 years old, but maybe if I lose a little weight, I'll live to the 91 that it had prior. We'll just see. So just for giggles, people, if you want to click the link in the show notes, there's a life expectancy calculator there.
Hmm. Okay, so we have 4% rule, we have life expectancy method. Another way that some people are making withdrawals is it's been referred to as either the guardrail strategy or the dynamic withdrawal method. And what underlies this whole concept is that a recognition that the stock market isn't static, that there's going to be good years and bad years. So two researchers, Guyton and Klinger, came up with this strategy, And if you think about just guardrails on a road or even the lines on a road, it's meant to kind of keep you within two parameters, if you will. And so what they suggest is you have a base withdrawal rate. So again, it could be that 4% that we talked about previously. And then you have guardrails on either side. So you come up with a percentage that works for you. So maybe 10% on the upside, 10% on the downside. And then when you hit those guardrails, that is an indication that you can either spend more when the increase has passed the guardrail, or throttle back and spend less when the decrease has hit the guardrail, market decline. So again, I think it's a lot of high maintenance. There's a lot
Yeah.
of, this is not an easy concept because obviously people have to be tracking market conditions pretty much in real time. And it's not for the faint of heart, but their research has shown, a little bit, you have a little bit more flexibility, but then you also have to be willing to cut back when the
Yeah.
market goes down. So that can be difficult for some people.
Yeah, and also oftentimes when the market, so Dan and I had this conversation as well when we were talking about guardrails. When the market's going down, especially the biggest decreases, that's generally when the economy is doing poorly.
Hmm.
And what I've noticed is that, so if you're someone who really likes to travel, let's say, well, the best time to travel is when nobody else can afford to travel. So, like, if the economy is doing poorly, you're going to get very good travel deals. You're going to be able to do things you wouldn't have been able to do when everything was booming and everybody was traveling. The cost of everything was so much more expensive. And so, if you're having to reduce your spending at the exact time where everything actually becomes more affordable, I don't know. Like, that's not when I want to reduce my spending. That's actually when I want to increase my spending.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe there's a reverse rule where you take out less when everything's good, and then I think the problem there is things are usually good longer than they are bad. So that's the biggest issue with that kind of thinking. But you know, right now it's really expensive to do a lot of some of the traveling stuff because everybody's doing it. And if the economy goes sour a little bit, those things are going to become more affordable. And I don't want to cut my spending at that point in time. That's when I really want to, put the foot down on the accelerator.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I would think this method would be something that if people were going to do it, probably with the help of a financial advisor, because again, it's pretty high maintenance keeping track of everything.
True.
Um, okay, another strategy that I wrote about was the Social Security delay strategy. And by that, I mean simply people wanting to delay claiming their benefits until age 70. That would be the maximum. You wouldn't, there's no point to go beyond 70 because the delayed retirement credits end, but they have a gap perhaps. And so, what are some things that people can do to kind of fill that gap? Now, some people may have an adequate pension. I'm thinking about our education community. Many of them do tend to retire in their late 50s, early 60s, and they may have a decent pension that can cover all their expenses. But if not, some of the strategies that people sometimes use to kind of almost as a bridge loan, if you will, until they can get to
Yeah.
age 70, would be a reverse mortgage. You'd have to be at least 62 for that. A part-time job or self-employment would also do it, or taking withdrawals from taxable accounts, and using that as your income stream until Social Security. And of course, when you delay Social Security, you're not just coming up with a bigger benefit for yourself, but you're also coming up with a bigger benefit for your spouse as a survivor benefit. So those are some things to think about. And
And
then the last, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
I was
Scott.
going to say it'll also give you potentially the ability to maybe do some additional tax planning because you've got some years where maybe your income won't be as high. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you can do some Roth conversions.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to delay that Social Security really, really helps with being able to save on taxes long term and lowering those required minimum distributions later on by doing Roth conversions. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to also put a link to an article in the show notes from Michael Kitchis, who just put out a piece on not delaying Social Security and a few reasons why people might consider not delaying Social Security, which I thought was really good. Um, I still tend to be with delaying Social Security. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people, but it's always good to have a contrarian view and who it might affect, who it might be better for to not delay Social Security. So we'll put that in there. But
Hmm.
I'm in the same boat as you on this, Barbara.
Okay, and then the last thing I wrote about in that section of the post was just what I call carve-outs. And probably the two most carve-outs where you're basically wanting to preserve lump sums would be for heirs and long-term expenses. So I wrote about the fact that if we assume like a nursing home would cost $10,000 per month, and you wanted to have 60 months, 5 years worth of expenses, that you would want to have a carve out of about $600,000. So what I'm just saying there is that's the money that's kind of your no touch money that you wouldn't be uh, putting into any calculation for withdrawal. It would just be set aside. And again, the two big areas that people tend to do this for are they want to have a certain amount of a bequest to their heirs, and then they want to have a certain amount for long-term care expenses. So those are kind of the withdrawal strategies for your non-RMD assets. And then right around the time that I was writing this post, I happened to get a copy of the new book, The Wealth Ladder, Nick Majuli's book. And I just love his 0.01% rule for guilt-free spending. And I got to tell you, I wish I had known about that rule a whole lot sooner. Would have freed me up to spend more. But basically, what this rule states, and it's also been called the 1/10,000th rule, is that if a potential purchase, something that you're thinking about doing or buying or whatever, costs 0.01% or less of your net worth, you don't need to agonize about it because it's not going to jeopardize your wealth. So, in other words, your money is going to grow back whatever you take, based again on the amount of assets that you have, of course. So, I just think it's a really good thing to kind of find your number with his calculation. And so I did that in the article. I talked about somebody who's and again, this is all taken from his book, just examples that he mentioned in the book, that if somebody has a $10,000 net worth and you multiply that by 0.0001, you get to take out $1 a day guilt free. And $100,000, you're up to $10 a day. $1 million, you're up to $100 a day. And $5 million, you're up to $500 a day. So again, just realizing that your wealth will grow back the amount that you're taking out. And it's just a good strategy to think about. Gives you kind of permission to spend without thinking about those emotional losses that we talked about before, where you think your portfolio is going down permanently. Well, according to this rule, it's not going to go down permanently because you're going to grow it back, and then you can take more the next day. So I thought that was a really good strategy.
Barb, I've used that. I was just visiting my parents in New Mexico last week, and I feel like I'm becoming a little more freewheeling with the spending. And I do like this permission structure.
I do too. I think it's really important. I've used it myself in the last couple of weeks. So kudos to Nick for coming up with that. That whole wealth tier strategy is pretty impressive. And then this particular rule that's derived from it.
And we should say we had him on our pod talking about this book, and I will post to that interview, which includes a link to the article that you're referring to.
Hmm. Right. Okay, and then the next section of the blog post, I just talked about bequests and philanthropy because it's very unlikely that if somebody has been, the super saver aunt that I talked about before and accumulated a large balance, that they're not going to die without leaving some money. So then again, we have to look at the rules for the RMDs for spouses and non-spouse beneficiaries. And some people will actually give money to charity instead. I've talked to a number of students of mine in classes, and they're all thinking that they're going to give the RMD assets to charity and then do stepped up basis assets, stocks and things that heirs can inherit, like taxable accounts, that they would get for their family members. I always caution them, though, that you need to have a conversation with your family if you're going to do some sort of strategy like that, because obviously family members would rightly assume that the balance would be going to them. But if it's part of an overall tax planning strategy and the numbers work, they might decide to, do it the other way instead, because the charities don't have to pay tax the way, um, people would, with the RMD requirements. So that's really important. I don't know, Scott, would you add anything else?
No, I think no, I think you covered it well. I definitely agree that you need to make sure the kids or whoever thinks going to inherit that money knows that that money's going to charity. But, a lot of people, it makes sense, and you point this out that it's better to leave taxable assets if you have taxable assets to your heirs than the charitable. So if upon your death your strategy is to give some to charity and some to your heirs, that IRA money is really, really good money to give to charities. It's a very good way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I should put a pitch in for a new show on Netflix, which had a scene about inheritance. Has anyone on this call seen The House of Guinness?
I've heard
I'm
about it. People have
about
told
to
me about it.
It's so
about to start
good.
it with Shauna. Yeah, I
It's so
haven't.
good. It's the folks that did Peaky Blinders.
Oh yeah.
And I won't give it away, Scott, but there is an inheritance scene, the reading of the will, and it again, I don't know how much of this is fact and fiction, but it was kind of brilliant the way the dad, Mr. Guinness, the brewery founder, handled his four very different children. I think you'll enjoy his strategy, is all I will say.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to watch that. A friend recommended that to me as well. Okay, so then toward the end of the article, I just talk about the fact that ingrained savings habits die hard and frugality as well. So you've got the save, 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 and the be frugal, frugal, frugal. And what are some ways to kind of practice spending? So one is just stepping outside your comfort zone. So people who've been used to being cramped up in coach on airplanes and uh, mezzanine, rear row mezzanine at plays and concerts and things. Maybe you step it up and, sit a lot closer to the stage and get those business class seats on airplanes and, just make the ride a whole lot smoother because you can afford it. I mean, if you do Nick Majuli's rule and the math works out and you can afford it, go for it.
Well, Scott's
So
been doing this since I've met him. I mean, when I get to the airport, I'm looking for him. He's in a club. I get on the airplane and I'm in the back and he's up front. I mean, Scott's been practicing spending for about as long as I've known him.
there you go. Yeah, the coach guy and the first class guy, huh? Okay, and then another one is answering some hard questions. So some of the questions that I put out in my book, Flipping a Switch, are ask why did you amass all this money? And if you have no plans to spend it or gift it, what's going to happen? What are you waiting for? Will your health get any better with age? Probably not. So, front end some of those expenses in those go-go years when you have health and mobility is so important. And then the final question, if you don't spend your money, who will? And, that's a pretty sobering question. That'll get a lot of people thinking about some of the ways to spend their wealth or gift their wealth. I mean, it doesn't have to be spending, just coming up with a plan as to where their assets will go when they pass. And then another thing that I wrote about in the book is just automating savings withdrawals because every time you write a check or a withdrawal slip at a bank, it's kind of you're feeling that pain of
Yeah.
loss. And so if you don't have to experience the pain of loss, if you can set something up automatically uh, that will provide some cash that's coming out of your accounts, but again, you don't have to physically go to a bank or make a transaction. It's set it and forget it type of thing. So that could be things like transferring from savings to checking. Some mutual funds have automatic withdrawal plans, just like they have automatic deposit plans. You can do it on the back end as well and take the money out in regular increments. So there are some ways to do that. I'm sure there's apps that can do that kind of thing too, to set reminders to do those kinds of things. So anyway, those are some of the strategies to just start thinking about how do you spend, and it just you have to practice it, and the more you practice, the better you'll probably get at it.
Scott and
So
I have
When
spoken about a book before called Die with Zero. And I know, Scott, you don't love all aspects of the book, but the idea is spend the money that you're going to give people while you die, but after you die, give some of it while you're still
mm,
alive. And there's multiple benefits. One, personal satisfaction in seeing that person get the money. And also, you die, let's say, Scott, you do live past 90. Your kids are going to be like 60, right? And it's not like they could have used the money earlier, I think is the concept. If you're giving money to kids in their 30s, 40s, 50s, that could be more beneficial. And I think that is something that I want to really try to do.
hmm Yeah, there's been a lot written about that, and of course the younger generations are having so much problem with student loans and entering the housing market, and they've got a lot of things stacked against them that probably they could use that money for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and I think this is going to lead into you where you're going next. I think one of the things that keeps people from practicing spending, getting outside of their comfort zone, is this inability to accurately know what your health insurance or what your health care costs are going to be
hmm
long term. We don't know how long we're going to live, and we don't know how that quality is going to be, and we don't know because there is no real cap on what the costs might be for healthcare, whether or not you're going to need to bring in-house aides and how much that's going to cost. Like, it's very difficult to plan for knowing how much of it might be zero. You might just like die quickly, right?
hmm
You might live to 85 and die quickly. You might live to 90 and get dementia and need 7 years of care. And we don't know where that falls. And long-term care insurance isn't really an option anymore for anybody, except for the very wealthy. I don't think, unless you've already purchased it, then keep a hold on it. So I think that is one of the things that makes it, I think, very, very difficult to be, oh, let's just spend this money. We won't need it. Because there's no way to really cut off, where that potential healthcare spending is going to be. That's a problem I think we have to solve in this country.
Right. And again, that's where I mentioned the carve outs before. People are trying to at least carve out some money to self-insure if they had to for
Yeah.
some pretty high expenses for sure. I included some research studies in the article, and I thought it was kind of interesting that one study just talked about the fact that the people who are in the top quintile of financial wealth, they're nowhere near going to be in any kind of danger of running out of money. It's just not going to happen. They're just going to have a whole lot more assets than they'll ever spend during their lifetime. And another study that I found was interesting because they found that retirees spend far more from their lifetime income than their accumulated wealth.
Yeah.
So they'll spend the pension money and the Social Security, the money that's coming in on a regular basis, but ask them to pull some money out of any kind of savings account, And it's like, oh, I don't think so. So
Yeah.
again, it's a lot of behavioral finance that's wrapped up in this and mental accounting and uh, but again, people do tend to treat different pots of money in different ways.
I wonder if that's a factor in some people taking Social Security early
Could be, just wanting to get it while they can, kind of that mentality for sure.
and not to take as much from their other savings.
Right. And some people really have a genuine need to take it as soon as possible too.
True.
So I guess should I just end with the
Yeah,
recommendations that we
let's
have,
do those.
Dan?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. So these were at the end of every post that I write for 403BYs, I always have 6 smart strategies. So I consider these the action steps. Now that you've read, 1,300 words or something about a topic, what do you do with this information? So that we kind of always end the post on this way. So one is just to develop a retirement spending plan. Looking at what you think your sources of income are going to be, fixed and variable, expenses, occasional expenses, and just look at your current budget and think, okay, if I'm 10 years older and I'm about to retire, what's going to change? I won't have the commute, but I might be paying more for health care. I might not be living in a high cost state, I'll live in a low cost state. So just kind of, looking at what you think. It's a projection. Nobody's going to have a crystal ball and have it 100% accurate, but at least you'll be thinking about what your income and expenses will be and your cash flow. And then, of course, prepare that RMD withdrawal plan. So I guess you'll put the link into that uh, in your show notes, the link to that worksheet that people can use to figure out how much they gift and resave and spend from their RMDs. And then number three, I mentioned this previously, you might want to consider front loading some of your travel and leisure expenses because they typically talk about later life in 3 stages. You've got the go-go years. You might retire as early as 60, let's say, and go-go's usually go up to about 74. And then you've got the slow goes that would be 75 to maybe 84. And then you've got they call it no-goes, but again, that's the time of your life where you tend to need more physical care. There might be some frailty. Scott, you mentioned dementia as well as a possibility. So you don't want to be the person that looks back in their 90s and said, I should have done more of anything in my 60s and 70s. So think about that in your planning. And then just doing these calculations. So calculate the 4% rule. Uh, Calculate the 0.01% rule from Nick Majuli and make them personal. It's one thing to hear about these rules. It's another thing to kind of adapt them to your own personal income and wealth situation. Also, good idea always to review your beneficiary designations. Make sure that they're up to date. Make sure that you have contingent beneficiaries as well. I had a student in one of my classes recently. She's serving as the personal representative for someone's estate, and the husband died, and 5 weeks later, the wife died. And they didn't have any contingent beneficiaries on anything. So all of those assets have to go to the probate estate because, nobody's been named to be a plan B. So make sure you have a plan B for the beneficiary designations on your 403B and IRAs and life insurance too, any place that has beneficiary designations. And then, of course, always get help when needed. So consider hiring a CFP. Many of them work on hourly basis or for flat fees. I'm a big fan of fee-only financial planners so that you're not being sold anything. You're just getting professional advice for your situation. And I always tell my students when you see a CFP, go prepared. The more you can bring together, calculate your net worth, calculate your cash flow, make sure you bring all the documents that are related to your questions. Go prepared to see your CFP, and then, you can get right down to business and get all your questions answered. So those would be the recommendations that I would have. So again, just to kind of summarize, most of the information we see in the 403B community is on accumulation. I hope this has helped people think about the time of their life where they'll be involved with decumulation.
Barbara, this is wonderful. In fact, during our talk here, I booked a trip to Italy because I just turned age 60, and you said, the go-go years. I should better check with Mandy, but I'm kidding. But that is a place I think I'd like to go in the next year or so. But I also like, I think logically I know that I'm going to get older and that I will not be as active in my later years, but I'm someone that needs sometimes permission from experts. And this is why we love that you write for us, Barbara. We love your expertise. We love seeing things like this. So I know I speak for Scott when I say thank you again for all you do. This is going to be so helpful to so many people.
You're quite welcome. Always happy to be on your show.
We look forward to having you back. Thanks again, Barbara.
Yep, bye.